Hello everyone and welcome to the IR Update. Today with us we have Alison Sternberg, Senior Vice President in Investor Relations at FuboTV. Hello Alison, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
It's our pleasure. To start, Alison, can you tell us a bit about FuboTV and about your career in investor relations?
Sure. So I'll start with Fubo. Fubo is a sports-first, complete cable TV replacement platform. And we have a portfolio of content that includes 175 sports, news, and entertainment networks. So we really do lead with a sports-first orientation, but ultimately we have a very robust portfolio of other content, including, as I mentioned, entertainment and news, that's designed to really service not just the sports fan, but the entire family. And what's especially exciting, in my view, is that in addition to this robust portfolio of content that we offer, we're really differentiating ourselves through our product. And we're incredibly focused on continuing to innovate that product with the provision of a lot of interactive features. And really that's designed, I think, to kind of create and bring a new dimension of value to TV viewership for the consumer, to create something that's more interactive, more customized, sort of all in one place on one platform. So the company's at a very, very exciting inflection point in terms of its growth trajectory. I've been very fortunate in being able to help sort of spread the story across our Wall Street constituents, and also, get to really see the business scale at a really cellular level, because the role of IR, I think, is so cross-functional. And in order to really practitioner the role, in my view, in the most effective way, you really have to partner with the practitioners across the business, folks in product, folks in engineering, on the marketing team. I personally work very, very closely with our head of comms, who's extraordinary. And we make sure that there's consistency in terms of the messaging. And so it's been an incredible experience to get to fulfill this role at this company in this time period. I know you mentioned earlier that I think I'm the first in this category that you've had on, and it's a fantastic, really fascinating category, media and streaming, very dynamic, lots of players. And so that also makes it very, very exciting to be a participant in such a dynamic category. In terms of my background, I spent many, many years on the advisory side. Earlier in my career, I was in banking for a while. I was in private equity for a period of time, then went back to banking. But ultimately, I really wanted to be inside of a company, and I really wanted to fulfill an operating role that would allow me in some form or fashion to hopefully have my fingerprints on building a business, and in particular, businesses that are direct to consumer, that are seeking to fulfill an unmet consumer need. And I've been very, very fortunate over the last 10 years or so. I've worked across a variety of companies, all of which have been direct to consumer, all of which have been in different verticals: technology, med tech, now, and of course, in the case of Fubo, entertainment and media, but all of whom are recently public and are at an inflection point where they're really trying to build and syndicate out their story to the investment community, while at the same time, really getting the organization internally to focus on execution and understanding the materiality of those results towards the story that we're telling to Wall Street. So I've really enjoyed that. It's been incredibly interesting. It's been challenging at times, but I consider myself very lucky. And certainly in the case with Fubo, it's been another great example of being able to come in and work with an exceptional team to scale a business that's relatively, we're sort of past the 2-year now mark of being public, but still going through such an interesting evolution as a public company. And so it's been a really interesting journey, and I've been able to summon my experience having worked in finance on the advisory side before coming into these operating roles, I've been able to summon some of that experience and deploy it into these IR roles, and it's been really fun.
So it was a big transition from banking into IR. And what do you think is the biggest challenges in terms of keeping up to date with the competitors and everything it's doing, and with the changes in investor relations itself?
That's a really good question. I think you have to be a voracious consumer of information. You know, in this role, you're sitting at this very unique intersection in which you see what's going on across the business through the eyes of those who are practicing it on a day-to-day basis internally. At the same time, right, you are also very much in dialogue with those that are looking at the business from outside of the business, whether it's research analysts, whether it's buy-side folks, investors, existing investors, prospective investors. You also have advisors that work with the company in a variety of different contexts. And so I think, in my view, it's about taking advantage of that positioning. And as I said, really optimizing your contacts to stay abreast around what's going on in the macro, right? How are companies that are in your category being viewed by the investor at any given time? What kind of valuation are companies that are considered comps getting? Why is it different? How is it different? Reading the research that you get from the sell side, understanding what both the bull and the bear case is around the business, understanding where the vulnerabilities are or the perceived vulnerabilities in the business case, so that you can sort of build messaging that's preemptive in addressing some of those concerns. So I think it's maximization of your network in an effort to get information, sell side research reports. There are all sorts of industry reports that are available. Relying on a network of advisors, people that are in the corporate access teams of certain firms, talking to research analysts more than just, say, once a quarter, to really understand what are they seeing in the market, what are investors saying. And so I think it's an exercise of, like I said, optimizing, your contacts, and really just being a voracious consumer of information, so that you're kind of up to speed across every dimension.
It is a two-way street also, right? So
Yes.
you're consuming all that information, but you also have to engage and maintain a relationship with the analysts and investors. How do you engage with that community?
It's a really good question. I was just thinking about that, and I feel like in some ways, this sounds really corny, but the role is in some form or fashion connective tissue, right, between the external constituents that you serve and the internal folks that are running the business day to day, to make sure that there's an understanding internally around how the street views the story. And as I said earlier, what are the perceived vulnerabilities in the story? What do people need to see more of, understand better? Do we have the right KPIs out there that allow people to get a really comprehensive portrait of how the business is doing? I think as far as relationships, and I think you alluded to relationships with the analysts in particular, I think that comes from, again, establishing relationships early on and developing a two-way dialogue that is above and beyond just checking in every quarter after the earnings call. It's periodically checking in. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from investors? Here's what I'm hearing from where I sit. You sell side analyst at such and thus firm, you have a unique vantage point because you're looking across a variety of different companies that are operating in a category. Where are investors worried? Where are they? What's the rate limiting factor for them to necessarily put money to work, whether it's in our particular stock or whether it's in the category as a whole? And so it's the establishment of a two-way street. It's the maintenance of a dialogue outside of, I would say, the standard times that you would connect with research analysts. And I also think it's about being creative. There are so many interesting ways that you can partner with the research community around investor events, expert calls. You can host expert calls. You can have, obviously, there's NDRs, but there's a lot of different interesting ways that you can partner to kind of make sure that the messaging is being amplified. And so I think it's really just a matter of, again, nurturing those relationships. And this is, by the way, where I feel very lucky around my partnership that I referenced earlier with our comms and PR team, because they are so creative and thoughtful around not just the content of the messaging, but the way in which it's delivered. And so there's a lot of work that we've done collectively to think of new and different ways to engage externally and with investors.
Fantastic. And how do you maintain a great relationship when sometimes news are not that great? So if you have a negative situation, a declining stock price, things that go out of your control, how do you communicate that with your community without damaging the relationship?
So that's another really good question. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I really think this is another example of the importance of relationship building, creating trust, and giving investors a place to go if they have questions, by which I mean you never want to hide, right? I think in a way, when the stock is under pressure, when it seems at times that even the market, there's some asymmetry between how the market is valuing the stock and internally, you see the momentum in the business, you know the progress that's being made, and sometimes there's asymmetry with the stock price and kind of perceived inertia in the business. And I would say that those are the times when you need to communicate the most to your investors. I think it's important to be transparent, obviously within reason, right? There are certain things that in between quarters we simply can't say, and obviously we are beholden to that which we've already publicly announced. But there are ways to sort of give people comfort and explain to them what's going on in the business. There are things outside of our control, market dynamics that aren't necessarily Fubo specific, that will have an impact on the stock price. And in those cases, a lot of times it's really reinforcing what we are doing internally to execute against our plan, the materiality of our results towards that long-term plan. And again, I think transparency, being available to people, responding to people in a timely manner, offering yourself up to address the tough questions, so that people have a human being on the other end of the line that they can talk to, because sometimes it's as simple as people just wanting to talk to someone when they see the stock is going through a period of a lot of volatility, or when you have a quarter that maybe came in below expectations. Sometimes it's as simple as sort of humanizing the situation and taking time to explain to people what is happening and what's not happening. And so I think it's communication, transparency, and responsiveness, right? Getting back to people in a timely fashion, I think also goes a very long way.
Alison, can you provide an example of a successful investor relations campaign or initiative you have led in the media communications industry? Like, what were the goals, the strategies, and outcomes?
So this jumps immediately to mind. We had our first ever analyst day for Fubo in August of last year, and that was a pretty at the outset, it can be a very daunting task, because it was our opportunity to articulate for Wall Street, really even more broadly externally, what our long-term financial plan looks like, and in particular how we were thinking about the puts and takes that would get us to profitability in 2025. And so that was it was a significant undertaking, because we determined that we were going to do it virtually, but we wanted it very much to be a 360-degree tour in some ways for the investment community, a tour of the company where each business leader would get up and explain how the work they were doing in their individual part of the business actually unfolds into this long-term plan towards profitability in 25. And it was a pretty interesting project because I consider IR very multidisciplinary and cross-functional, just definitionally. We talked about that in some of the earlier questions that you had. But this project in particular was that and more, because we had to align our entire executive team around a plan. And then we had to think through around all of the different puts and takes across those different teams that would get us to that plan, and then wrap messaging around that plan. And so it really was a presentation of the long-term plan by everyone that's actually executing against it. And it's kind of amazing the amount of work that can go into something that ultimately takes a few hours in an afternoon, but is really pretty major when it comes to sort of articulating again the plan and planting a flag really around your profitability goals. And it was especially exciting to see the executive team really come together. I remember commenting to someone that it felt like for a few weeks there, the entire company was working on this project together, and it was kind of great, right? I think we were all super excited about telling our story, but it was a lot of work, but it was great. It was really great. And in the end, I think it was a very successful event in which everyone had an opportunity to get up in front of the community and explain, again, the materiality of the work they were doing, whether it was in product, technology, marketing, acquisition, you name it, the materiality of the work that we're doing towards achievement of that long-term plan, which was really, really quite something. So that would easily be my number one pick.
Congratulations on achieving that. Thank you. And do you have any last tips for people that are joining the IR professional now?
Build a network, get to know the business at a cellular level. It's a really unique vantage point to be sitting in this role. You have a lot of responsibility in a way, not in a way, you have a lot of responsibility. You are an ambassador of the brand. You are responsible to a variety of different constituents, and you have an opportunity to tell the story and make sure people understand your story. And so it behooves you, I think, in the role to know the story as well as possible and to understand it at a cellular level. What I mean by that is understand it top to bottom through the prism of the people in the business that are actually prosecuting the business. Spend time with the acquisition team, spend time with the product team, spend time with the comms team, the accounting team, the advertising sales team, the FP&A team. I think it'll make you a better practitioner of the role, and it'll be even more rewarding because you'll have such a deep appreciation of all the puts and takes that go into running a business and watching it scale. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much for those. It was really informative. It was a great conversation, and I appreciate having you here with us today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Great questions.
Thank you.